I used to take whatever work I could find once fall rolled around. When construction slowed and regular jobs dried up, odd work was how I paid the bills. Cleaning sheds, repairing fences, hauling junk, nothing glamorous, but it kept me moving. That's how I ended up answering a call that still makes my skin crawl. When I think about it, the job itself sounded harmless. Retired couple on the edge of town needed their old barn cleaned out before winter hit. They were polite, well-spoken, and offered decent pay. One detail stuck out, though almost as an afterthought. The wife mentioned they'd already had 2 helpers quit before finishing. At the time, I assumed it was just hard work or bad timing. People flake all the time. Their property sat where the pavement ended and dirt roads took over. The farmhouse looked normal enough, but the barn behind it was another story. It stretched long and crooked, its boards warped and peeling like old skin. The moment I stepped out of my truck, I noticed something strange. The air felt heavy, unnaturally still. Sounds didn't travel right. Even my footsteps felt muted. I told myself it was just the weather. Thick clouds were rolling in, and the air had that pressure-heavy feel that comes before rain. The wife handed me the barn keys and a handwritten list of items to remove. Old furniture, boxes, crates. She hesitated before mentioning the attic. Loft above the barn. Be careful up there, she said. Her tone made me pause. I expected her to mention weak boards or low beams, but she said nothing else. I didn't push it. The first hour went smoothly. Dust, rusted tools, broken chairs, the usual junk you'd expect in a barn that hadn't been touched in years. The structure felt sturdier than it looked, and I worked fast, loading items onto a dolly. The couple stayed inside the house the entire time. Through the kitchen window, I kept catching glimpses of them standing side by side, watching the barn, not checking phones, not talking, just watching. Eventually, I unfolded the ladder and climbed up into the loft. The moment my head cleared the hatch, that heavy stillness returned stronger than before. The air was warmer up there, stale and unmoving. The loft wasn't tall. I could only stand fully upright in the center. It stretched far back into shadow, deeper than I expected. My phone flashlight barely helped. It lit only narrow paths, leaving most corners swallowed by darkness. Boxes were lined up neatly in rows, each labeled with dates going back decades. I started dragging them toward the hatch. A few rattled faintly, like something small rolling inside. But when I checked, they were empty. Just dust and brittle cardboard. About halfway through, I heard it. A soft scrape behind me. Not loud, not sudden. Just the sound of weight shifting on old wood. I turned, expecting to see an animal, maybe a raccoon. Nothing. Just dark corners and the thin beam of my flashlight. I told myself it was the barn settling, but then the feeling hit me. That unmistakable sense of being watched, not stared at, not hunted, just observed. From just outside the edge of my light, like someone standing perfectly still, waiting. I called out, my voice sounding wrong up there flat and swallowed by the air. No response. The silence pressed in harder. The feeling didn't fade. It intensified, like whatever was there had moved closer. Another sound came from behind me, softer this time, intentional. I spun around, nearly losing my footing, swinging the flashlight wildly. Dust filled the beam. Old ropes hung from nails. Boxes stacked high. Nothing else. But my body knew better. As I backed toward the ladder, something caught my eye on the floor. Footprints, not mine. They were pressed into the dust, old enough that they weren't fresh, but clear enough to be unmistakable. They led from the far corner straight toward where I had been standing. They stopped less than a foot from my boots. I nudged one with my shoe. The dust shifted. Someone had stood there. Recently, I climbed down the ladder too fast, nearly missing a rung. Once my feet hit the main floor, I pulled the ladder away like that might somehow help. The barn felt different now, larger, emptier, like something unseen had more room to move. I tried to finish the job, but when I heard another sound from the loft, a dull thump, followed by slow, deliberate steps, toward the hatch, I didn't hesitate. I walked out of the barn and shut the doors behind me. The husband met me on the porch. Before I could explain, he asked, "You went into the attic, didn't you?" I told him I had. When I mentioned the sounds, he didn't look surprised, just tired, resigned. He told me I could leave the job unfinished and still get paid. His voice was steady. His hands were shaking. I took the money and left. As I loaded my truck, I glanced back at the barn. One of the attic windows had a crack in the grime-covered glass. Behind it, I saw a movement, not a face, not a shape, just darkness shifting, like someone stepping back out of view. Later, I asked around town. That barn used to belong to the husband's brother. He'd lived there alone until he vanished years ago. No body, no answers. They kept the barn exactly as he left it. I've never gone back, and when I drive past that road now, I don't look toward the barn, because I don't want to know if something up there is still waiting, the ladder for the next person willing to climb it. When I was 22, I moved back to my hometown for what was supposed to be a short reset year. My lease in the city fell apart, work was uncertain, and my parents had recently downsized. There wasn't an extra bedroom anymore, so the only space left for me was the sunroom at the back of the house. Calling it a room felt generous. It was basically a long glass enclosure attached to the house. Windows on 3 sides, thin walls, and no real insulation. During the day, it felt exposed. At night, it felt like sleeping inside a reflection. Still, it was temporary, and I told myself I could handle a little discomfort. The first night proved me wrong. The sunroom shared one solid wall with a storage closet my dad had sealed off years earlier. He always said it leaked when it rained and wasn't worth fixing, so the door had been boarded over and forgotten. Around 2 a.m, I heard a sound coming from that wall. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was rhythmic, a soft, steady thud like someone tapping their heel against the floor on the other side. Not frantic, not aggressive, just patient. I told myself it was the water heater shifting, even though I knew full well it wasn't located anywhere near that closet. Houses make noise, especially old ones. I rolled over and forced myself to sleep. Over the next week, the sounds changed. The tapping faded into a dragging noise, like fabric sliding across concrete. Some nights it lasted only a few seconds. Other nights it went on long enough that I found myself counting the time between movements, waiting for a pattern that never came. Then one night, it stopped entirely. A moment later, something bumped the shared wall slow, heavy, deliberate. I sat straight up in bed, staring at the wooden paneling, absolutely certain that someone had leaned against it from the other side. I stayed frozen until morning. I didn't tell my parents. I blamed exhaustion, the unfamiliar environment, the way the sunroom amplified every sound. I convinced myself I was just readjusting after years away from home. About a month in, something happened that broke that illusion. I woke up in the middle of the night to a faint vibration beneath my mattress. Not the whole bed, just the frame. It felt like someone lifting one corner slightly and letting it drop back into place. Again and again. I whispered stop without thinking, embarrassed, even as I said it. The movement stopped instantly, not gradually, not fading out, just stopped. The next morning, I checked everything. The floor was solid. The mattress sat on a metal frame. There was nothing that could have caused that motion. After that, the disturbances shifted. No more noises. No movement, just the feeling of being watched. The sunroom windows reflected everything at night. My bed, my dresser, me, and sometimes when I caught my reflection at the wrong angle. It felt like something else was there too, something that didn't match my movements. I kept telling myself it was just low light and tired eyes, until early October. I fell asleep with a book resting on my chest and woke to the sensation of my hair lifting, not being pulled, just gently raised, like fingers sliding underneath it. I shot upright. The book hit the floor. Behind me, the closet wall made a single, dull knock. That was when I finally told my dad. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I just explained the sounds, the movement, and what happened with my hair. He didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off. He told me to keep the sunroom door locked in, never open the sealed closet. His reaction unsettled me more than anything else had so far. He wasn't panicked, but he was tense, like someone being reminded of something they'd hoped stayed buried. When I asked why, he said only that the closet had history and it was better left alone. That night, I locked the sunroom door and wedged a chair under the knob. It didn't really make sense, but it made me feel less exposed. Around 3 a.m, I woke up again. Not to sound, but to pressure. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the moment before a storm break. The windows showed only my reflection and the faint outlines of trees outside. Then the chair creaked. It didn't slide. It didn't fall. It just shifted like something on the other side had tested the door's resistance. Behind me, the closet wall tapped twice. The first knock was firm. The second was lighter, almost curious. I turned on my phone's flashlight. In the glass, my reflection stared back pale, exhausted. But just behind my shoulder was something else. Not a full figure, just a darker shape leaning too close, not matching anything in the room. I spun around. Nothing. That was it. I grabbed my shoes and went straight to the living room couch. I didn't sleep again until morning. I told my dad I needed to move out sooner than planned. He didn't argue. A few days before I left, he finally explained. Before my parents bought the house, the previous owners had used that storage closet as a temporary room for a relative. The only description anyone ever gave was that the person didn't like being seen. No name, no timeline. After the relative passed away, the owners sealed the closet. They claimed they kept hearing movement inside of it when it was empty. My dad admitted he'd heard things too over the years, mostly during quiet seasons when the house felt hollow. He said whatever was in there wasn't violent, just attentive. I moved out within the week. On my last day, I went back into the sunroom to grab my boxers. Everything was quiet, but the sealed wall looked different. The wood paneling had a faint dent at head height, fresh enough to catch the light, like someone had leaned there recently. Nothing followed me when I left. Nothing else happened in that house while I was there. But to this day, I avoid sleeping near sealed doors or closed-off spaces. I don't care how irrational it sounds. Some places hold attention long after a person is gone, and once something notices you, there's no guarantee it won't try again.